Yeah.
Yes, so you are being recorded and the camera is, where is it done these days?
How about now? Still not?
We can
It's
hear
not
you.
that good.
At home here.
Yeah.
Babs, you hear? Can you hear us?
Can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yes, I can hear fine.
But
How about,
Ganilla is
Kathy,
echoing.
or can you hear us?
Ganilla is echoing, Daniel.
Charlotte?
Catherine?
No,
Yes.
where's Kathy?
What's that?
In the middle.
So Ganilla
Catherine,
is
can you hear
echoing.
us? Shake your head, nod your head.
Echoing. Can you hear me?
We can't hear you.
Yes, I can hear you.
This thing is for the birds. That's my mother-in-law used to say.
Okay, it's okay. Go on. We'll turn on our own volume.
I don't know what it is.
Maybe I shouldn't read.
Can you hear me, Daniel?
I'm so
There's that word.
happening here.
I can hear you, Catherine.
So, okay, Joanne, what's happening is we're picking up the sound from the
You're not muted.
laptop microphone and from their
Okay.
microphone, so it's echoing
That's
when
fine.
Ganilla
Okay,
speaks.
I can go in there and tell them. I'll be right
Okay.
back.
You have their mics on the screen. those people. Have they checked? Have they do a sound check?
The sound should be coming through here.
It's comforting. But
Yeah.
Just,
Just let me.
This is a new thing. This hasn't happened before, so I don't know what's going on. Philip Turman,
I'm here, yeah.
hi,
Hi.
good to see you.
How you doing?
What's the
Good to see you
matter?
too. I can hear you very well too.
Catherine, can I ask a question? Am I gonna see all the boxes while I'm reading? Or is
That is,
it?
you control that. You go to your gallery setting. And you can either choose, the full gallery or just the speaker. If you click on speaker, you'll only see the person who is actually speaking.
You mean the view thing?
Yeah.
the people at home, you still can't hear us, right?
I can hear you, Daniel.
I can
Kathy,
hear fine.
Is that a yes, you
Yep.
can hear us?
Yep.
Yeah, we can hear
Okay,
you.
how about,
Yeah, I can hear you
Thomas.
too.
you're muted, Thomas, but can you hear us?
I can hear you, Ganilla and Daniel.
We can hear you a little better,
I can hear
but let
everyone.
her
It-
talk. She's at the mic.
Right.
Yes, can you hear me?
It's not good. You sound distant and a little echoey.
Yeah, maybe you don't use the mic. I don't know.
Yeah, he sounds better than you do.
Right.
So then I'll speak a little further away from the mic.
Yeah, that's better. It's actually better. Go figure. I don't know. We live in a technocracy.
So I'm not sure how to do it, but I know put on my windows.
Yeah.
We're working every week, every month, we improve.
Philip Schultz, look at your messages.
My messages?
Yeah, I sent you a message. This is hilarious.
You mean the chat?
Yeah, chat.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we were talking earlier, I didn't realize it was you. Because Catherine should have said something and she didn't say it. All she
mean-
said was, do I know Philip Schultz? And I said, no, I've never met him, but
Oh,
I really
I
enjoy
thought
his
you were looking
poetry.
at him.
Meanwhile, you're talking to me. I didn't know it was you.
Oh,
Hear us. Is any better now?
That's great.
yeah, that's great.
That's really good, whatever it is. Don't touch it. Leave it alone.
at this point, I'm not sure I know it's me.
Well, I do know it's you, so
I'm just
you
a
can rest
box.
easy.
I'm just a box.
Okay, Ganilla, are you ready?
I am so ready. Are you guys
Okay, the
ready?
rest of us will be muted, right, Joanne?
Can you hear Ganilla
Can
now?
you hear me now?
Yes.
Great.
Hooray, let's go.
I can get rid of that.
I'm sorry, there's always something happening, and it's something about this building too. You know, some of you know I'm a guitar player. I have played in this space, sitting over there, sitting in the middle, sitting over there, sitting down here. And there's something about this space that swallows sound. So I apologize, but hopefully now everybody can hear. And I wish you all welcome. And I want to thank everybody who took time out of their busy schedule to come to the Buffalo Corner tonight. All of you who are here in person, all of you who are here on Zoom, I thank you. And I want to thank Congregation Shir Shalom for hosting this now regular Buffalo Corner once a month, and for Joanne Marquisi, our executive director, who takes care of everything, including me, and our Rabbi Alex, who is on his way home from Israel, Eretz Israel, right now. And so he sent a message. I apologize. He always sits over there, right there. You have amber necklace, yeah. That's his, yeah. So he said, I can't come because I'm flying home from Israel, but here is my poem I wrote in Israel. So he asked me to read it. So before we introduce our first reader, if you don't mind, I will read his poem. It's short and it's good. And it's called Pigeons in the Holy Land. The pigeon with the pink stripe picked at a piece of bagel. No, stop staring already. So what if my ancestor was part of a feast for King Herod? Perched triumphant on Noah's shoulder. Look at that date front there in front of Bag Hapoalim. Remember Tamar? She was there with the olives in front of the entrance to the Israel Museum. You guessed it. Abraham and Sarah. What's so special about the pigeon? Let me pick in peace. Thank you, Rabbi Alex. And now I welcome our guest host, Catherine Hastings, to welcome our first reader, Philip Schultz.
Good evening. I am unmuted, right? You can hear me? Okay, good. So I first met Philip Schultz in April of 2010 when I interviewed him for my radio program on Word Temple. It was a station in Northern California, and he was visiting. And he's the winner.
We had you on mute, so if you can start over, please.
Oh, okay. I met Philip Schultz in April of 2010 when I interviewed him for my radio program, Word Temple, on Northern California's NPR affiliate, KRCB. He's the winner of the 2008 Pulitzer Prize for Poetry for his book, Failure. And that day he read from his latest collection at the time, The God of Loneliness, Selected and New Poems. He literally had the listening audience riveted as he read poems that connected them, sometimes joyfully, sometimes painfully, to his own experiences, emotions, and imagination. As a matter of fact, when I opened that book to prepare this introduction, I saw that he had written inside, "To Catherine, my new friend who cried for me." And I literally came to tears when I was listening to him read from my program. That is the kind of power his poetry has. Well, time has marched on, and now he's the author of 8 poetry collections, the memoir, My Dyslexia, and The Wherewithal, a novel in verse. Last year, Norton released his memoir, Comforts of the Abyss, The Art of Persona Writing. It is a book worth its weight in gold for any writer, and I just think anyone who likes to read. And there are clues in the book as to how he has written poetry that makes us feel so deeply. From page 150 of that book, the questions we ask ourselves as writers open not only our minds, but our hearts and souls. If we can dare to go there, to pursue what most frightens us, whatever wisdom and insight we may find will most certainly be of equal value to our readers, who also appreciate the difficulties involved in pursuing the truth. Besides the Pulitzer, Schultz is the recipient of the Academy of American Poets Lamont Prize, an American Academy and Institute of Arts and Letters Award, as well as a National Book Award nomination, a Guggenheim Fellowship in Poetry, and fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts and the New York Foundation for the Arts, a Fulbright Scholarship, and the Levinson Prize for Poetry Magazine. He founded and directed New York University's graduate creative writing program, where he worked for 4 years, and then he founded the Writers Studio in 1987, something that I hope he'll address in the Q&A session at the end of the evening. He has been teaching creative writing for almost 5 decades. He's a wonderful poet, and he's just a great person too. So please welcome Philip Schultz.
Well, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure. Let's see. Okay, can you see me? Okay, because I'm a little box in my, okay, fine. Thank you, Catherine. It's a great pleasure to be here. You know, I just want to say quickly that I remember back in 78 or 79, after my first book was published, Ansi Bard brought me out to Buffalo to read, and I gave a reading, and after the reading, I met a gentleman named Carl Dennis, who was in attendance, and he came up and we met each other and became friends. We were fans of each other's work. And so here we are all these years later, what is it? My math is terrible, 43 years later, 45 years later, now reading together in Buffalo. I'm going to begin with just a few passages from the memoir, Comforts of the Abyss, and which deals with all the various writers who influenced me, and you know, and also I talk about the art of persona writing, which is what the school does. The writing process is seldom logical, and writers of any seriousness often enough see themselves as unabridged and curious creatures, desirous of the very thing they fear most, exposure of any kind. I know now that if I'm not made uncomfortable by something I'm writing, I'm probably not saying anything of value. That true emotional connection almost always creates anxiety. Why else would I need to investigate every thought and act, remain stubbornly suspicious of every desire and surprise, of even my very motivation to create? Isn't it only reasonable that I should feel like a stranger to myself, knowing that the excitement I seek in revelation is matched with dread of equal, if not superior, strength? That this is what the great project of creative thinking is all about, finally, knowing and revealing our incapacities and most intimate thoughts in a cautionary tale we tell ourselves when we think no one else is listening. Isn't this what all the masters were about too? Henry James, Tolstoy, George Eliot, Shakespeare, Gerard Manley Hopkins, and most certainly Walt Whitman, performing on their psyches surgeries of such magical persuasion, they were willing to bring forth what they may have perceived as shameful and pathetic, to disrupt their most intimate sense of privacy and contentment. In something like 1968 or 1969, I was in San Francisco, and I was invited to a party given by two friends to meet Elizabeth Bishop. She was the guest there. She had been their teacher back in New York, and they knew that I loved her work passionately, that she was perhaps my favorite poet. And of course, when I met her, I was so shy I couldn't open my mouth. But I positioned myself over her where she sat, so I watched every single thing she did. The host of the party was in a sour mood. And his wife came over to Elizabeth and asked if she could do something to cheer him up. And now I'll just read this passage. Her husband's mood, he was in fact sulking at his own birthday party. Since she, Elizabeth, was something of a magician, she wanted to see if she could help out. Smiling generously, Bishop asked for a newspaper, and being given one, quickly tore off a page and began, with the alacrity and skill that seemed nothing less than miraculous, folding it into the figure of a bird. Yes, a life-size newspaper bird that actually looked as if it could fly of its own powers. We were all staring at her and it now, because it, this magical paper being, did seem to be coming to life before our very eyes. It was a performance unlike any I had ever witnessed. And now, having finished creating it, she took a cigarette lighter out of her purse and, pausing to smile at her audience, called my friend over in a voice no larger, louder, or more commanding than that of a small girl. He, my friend, who had been standing nearby watching along with all the rest of us, now came over to stand obediently before her, as curious as he was perhaps concerned. What role, after all, could he possibly be playing in all this? Glancing around at her enraptured audience, she paused only to smile first at my friend and then at the paper bird, both of whom seemed anxious for the next act to commence. And then, with a snap of her thumb, she lit the lighter and then the bird, which seemed of its own volition to float up into the air, its wings aglow with fire. As if choreographed to do so, we all stepped back in unison to see the paper bird hover high above her head, its tiny wings robustly flapping in what perhaps was a sudden breeze bestowed upon it and us by some indigenous god who just happened to be passing by. And like all the rest of us, became so enthralled as to forget whatever else had occupied her. Along with all the rest of us, my friend was laughing and clapping his hands, and then was dancing from foot to foot, as if he too had been set on fire and transformed into someone entirely new and happier. Now I'm going to read some poetry. Just let me ask you, you all can hear all this, right? Because I'm seeing a picture of our, huh?
Yes, we can hear you.
You can, okay, because
Yes.
usually in Zoom, okay. I'm going to start with a poem that was commissioned by the Central Conference of American Rabbis. I thought that's appropriate given this occasion and where I'm reading. The occasion for they put out an anthology for women rabbis, and I wrote a poem for it called Women Rabbis. It's dedicated to Rabbi Deborah Stein. At the Big Shoal on Robert Street, Grandma argued in Yiddish with the angels floating around the purple peeling ceiling about whether God was a woman. Below, Dad sat with the other men, silently worrying. Once I asked Grandma why women weren't rabbis, and the blue light in her eyes shines right through me. Men, she said, were afraid of women because women knew where all their dreams were buried and where to hide after men blew up world again. So now, all these years later, I'm sitting downstairs with both men and women, listening to a woman rabbi welcome in the new year, remembering Grandma quoting from the Talmud. Be careful if you make a woman cry, God counts her tears. The woman came out of a man's rib, not his feet to be walked on, but from the side to be equal, and next to the heart to be loved. Okay, Grandma's right. Some things change for the better. And now if you look up, you'll see her up in the balcony, still arguing about how life and death are set before us like delicacies in a kosher deli we must choose between. Choose life, Grandma hollers down at me. However bitter and capricious your misdeeds, humble and exalted your prayers, history is a mother who alone knows the recipe for happiness, devotion, and lakshan kukul. Should I just wait for that to end, or? Okay. Okay, continue.
Yes, I muted him.
Good.
If you put your view on speaker, then we can just see you and we don't have to look at everyone else.
Well, I would like that. It is on speaker. And I'm seeing everyone else, but not me. I don't know why.
It looks like it's on gallery.
No, it's on speaker.
Okay.
Gallery is video.
Okay. The God of Loneliness. It's a cold Sunday, February morning, and I'm one of 8 men waiting for the doors of Toys R Us to open in a mall on the eastern tip of Long Island. We've come for the Japanese electronic game that's so hard to find. Last week, I waited 3 hours for a store in Manhattan to disappoint me. The first today, bundled in 6 layers, I stood shivering in the dawn light, reading the new Aeneid translation, which I hid when the others came, stamping boots and rubbing gloveless hands, joking about sacrificing sleep for ungrateful sons. My boy broke 2 front teeth playing hockey. A man wearing shorts laughs. This is his reward. My sons will leap into my arms, remember this morning all their lives. The game is for my oldest boy, just back from Iraq, a man in overalls says from the back of the line. He plays these games in his room all day. I'm not worried. He'll snap out of it. He's earned his rest. These men fix leaks, lay foundations for other men's dreams without complaint. They've been waiting in the cold since Aeneas founded Rome on rivers of blood. Virgil understood death begins and never ends, that it's the God of loneliness. Through the window, a clerk shouts, "We have only 5. The others seem not to know what to do with their hands, tuck them under their arms or let them hang, naked and useless. Is it because our hands remember what they held, the promises they made? I know exactly when my boys will be old enough for war. Soon 3 of us will wait across the street at Target, because it's what men do for their sons." The Art of Whaling. It's from, and this is a quote from Lao Tzu. He who shows himself is not conspicuous. The way is forever nameless. Jim, older and apparently in worse shape than me, is swearing as he bangs my stretcher against the back of the ambulance. Billy, the young driver, laughs as he kindly slides me inside, where Betsy, a retired librarian my sons love, recalls hearing me read a poem about pumpernickel that made her hungry. Let her, Jim says, and she'll talk you to death. Well, Betsy says, you failed a stress test. No big thing, a stent or two. Relax. Now we're running traffic lights, the wailing reaching all the way to high C. You'll get fentanyl, she sings, might be inspiring. If he writes one, Jim snorts, you'll be in it. Your wife has sculpture at the Nature Conservancy, Betsy adds, where I also volunteer. I myself volunteer for nothing. My charity, Remembering Everything. I love poetry, Betsy laughs, but it gives me headaches. Hang in there, fella, Jim weeks. We're almost there. Outside the back window, a flock of pink clouds spell out a line by Lao Tzu. Governing a large state is like boiling a small fish. Yes, if mishandled, both fail miserably. The wailing's now a medley of Dylan's rasping loneliness and Elvis rocking my jailhouse loose of all my precious bitterness. Oh, life, please forgive my stumbling back alley escapes into respectability, my endless cacophony of unleavened regret and self-pity. Please, 1 hour more of my wife and sons, glorious paradox and my pirated iTunes, Gerard Manley Hopkins and Wikipedia. Oh, thank you for this nameless, beautiful, ungovernable, small, pink fish. This is a poem I remember the last time I read it in Buffalo. Carl introduced me, and generously in his introduction, he made a reference to a poem that for some bizarre reason I neglected to read. I'm going to make up for that absence, and I'm going to read it now. It's called The Adventures of 78 Charles Street. For 32 years, Patricia Parmalee's yellow light has burned all night in her kitchen down the hall in 2E. Patricia, I love to say her name, Parmalee, knows where across the street Hart Crane wrote The Bridge. The attic saw Bello holed up in, furiously scribbling the adventures of Augie March. The rooftop, Bing Crosby yodeled off, dreaming of Broadway. The naughty epicene secrets of each born-again townhouse. Indeed, we, Patricia and me, reminisce about Tiny Lizzie and Joe Pascanucci, one deaf, the other near blind, waddling hand in hand down the hall, up the stairs, in and out of doors, remembering sweetening Sicilian peaches, ever-blooming daylilies, a combined 170 years of fuming sentence fragments, elastic stockings, living and outliving everyone on the south side of Charles Street. How Millie Kilterborn, a powerhouse of contemptuous capillaries inflamed with memories of rude awakenings, wrapped herself in black chiffon when her knocked-up daughter Kate married a mafia son and screamed, "Nixon, blow me," out her fifth-floor window, then dropped dead face first into her gin-spiked oatmeal. How overnight Sharon in 4E became a bell-ringing Buddhist, explained cat litter, America, pleurisy, multiple orgasms, why I couldn't love anyone who loved me. And Archie McGee and 5W, one silver cross earring, a tidal wave of dyed black hair, jingling motorbike, motorcycle boots, Jesus boogieing on each enraged oil bicep, screaming 4 flights down at me for asking the opera singer across the courtyard to pack it in. This is NYC, shithead, where fat people sing while fucking. Archie, whom Millie attacked with pliers, and Lizzie fell over, drunk on the stairs, angry if you nodded or didn't, from whom, hearing his boots, I hid shaking under the stairwell, until I found him trembling outside my door. Scram, Zorro, I'll be peachy in the morning. In a year, 3 others here were dead of AIDS, everyone wearing black, but in the West Village, everyone did every day anyway. Patricia says the Righteous brothers and I moved in Thanksgiving 1977 and immediately began looking for that ever-loving feeling, rejoicing at being a citizen of the ever-clanging future, all of us walking up Perry Street, down West 10th, around Bleecker, along the Hudson, with dogs, girlfriends, and hangovers, stoned and insanely sober, arm in arm and solo, under the big skyline, traffic whizzing by, through indefatigable sunshine, snow, and rain, listening to the Stones, Monks, Springsteens, and Beethoven. One boy and foot after the other, nodding hello, good morning, happy birthday, adieu, adios, auf Wiedersehen. Everyone, before anyone went co-op, renovated, thought about being sick or dying, when we all had hair and writhed on the floor because someone didn't love us anymore, when nobody got up before noon, wore a suit, or joined anything, before there was hygiene, confetti, a celery, cholesterol, or a list of names to invite to a funeral. Yes, the adventures of a street in a city of everlasting hubris, and Patricia's yellow light when I can't sleep and come to the kitchen to watch its puny, precious speck stretch so quietly, so full of reverence into the enormous darkness. And I, overcome with love for everything so quickly fading, my head stuck out the window, breathing the intoxicating melody of our shouldered and cemented in little island, here now in the tenement of this moment, dear Patricia's light, night after light, burning with all the others on 78 Charles Street. Patricia finally left the building. We still own that apartment, and Patricia, after all those years, finally left. I think I'm going to end with 2 more. I'm hoping my time is allows that. One is called Love Poem for Monica. We recently, she's happy. We recently enjoyed our 28th wedding anniversary. Yes, 28 years is a long time to know someone, call someone a wife, friend, and mother of my children, to play such an important role in the story of our lives. How marriage blends, allocates, and divides, reveals truths understood only by time. A story of sympathy, faith, and patience, told without a narrator or design. How often I pretend to watch TV while watching you make dinner, holding each ingredient up to the light, as if tasting its rightful place in our lives. Your hazel eyes recognizing the me I don't really know. Is this why I love watching you run along the edge of the world, moving between ocean and morning sky, your breath keeping time with the waves? Yes, a story told only once about elegance and art and promise, but how we made ourselves and each other out of nothing but love and time. And the last poem is one that Carl has been helping me with. And it's, I plan to have it be the title poem of a new book. It's called Good News. Waking from a dream I don't want to remember, I turned to an old movie on TV called Good News, in which Peter Lawford, playing a football hero, is kissing June Allison, his French tutor, tentatively, because, well, who isn't worried about what lies ahead? Yes, what lies ahead. Here I am, a 78-year-old man, dealing with the after effects of radiation and other maladies, embedded in a community of nervous insomniacs, seeking diversion from relentless bad news. Annihilated hospitals, wailing mothers, earthquakes, school shootings, and migrants hiding in garbage trucks. Okay, bad news gets more attention because we're all relieved it's happening elsewhere to someone else, which is bad news soaked in very bad. This movie, made in 1947, 2 years after endless war, is valiantly trying to point a way forward. June and Peter are now being swung around a glittering dance floor by young people ecstatic about what lies ahead. Without doubt, the younger me would now be hopping over sofas, celebrating each lucid moment of precious sanity. A week ago, wearing a cap and gown, our youngest son skied down a Vermont hill, happily embracing his future, while 2 weeks before, the wing of a plane his best friend father was in broke off, and the future also drowned. As we speak, surveillance balloons are exploding above us. Innocents everywhere are being sacrificed for reasons that want nothing to do with us. While Peter and June, alongside my son, are skiing down a hill in caps and gowns, seeking the good news embedded in the bad, the well springs of knowledge, the smallest scrap of certainty, all that remains stubbornly buoyant and unbroken. Thank you.
I'm not sure who is gonna thank you, but on behalf of everybody here, thank you for the buoyant and the unbroken. Thank you so much for coming to the Buffalo Corner. And now I welcome my co-host, Irene Sykes.
Thank you, Gunilla. Thank you, Philip Schultz. I'm an ardent fan of yours and my heart is beating. I can barely breathe or speak. That was so beautiful. I have to buy all the books that I don't already have. Great. Now it's my pleasure to introduce another remarkable poet. The Western New York literary community has long been proud to have Carl as a resident of Buffalo. We are very fortunate to have Carl Dennis read tonight at the Buffalo Corner. A little bit of history. There are so many awards and prizes that I'm going back a little bit to give some background. Carl Dennis was born in St. Louis, Missouri. He earned a BA from the University of Minnesota and a PhD from the University of California, Berkeley. He taught at the State University of New York, Buffalo from 1966 until 2001, where he was both a professor of English and writer in residence. Maybe some of the people here were lucky enough to have attended a class for Carl Dennis. Dennis is the author of 14 books of poetry, as well as a collection of essays. Poetry is Persuasion. In 2000, he received the Ruth Lilly Poetry Prize for his contribution to American poetry. The next year, in 2001, he was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for his collection Practical Gods. I'm going to read a minute from the cover of his latest book, Earthborn, 2022. The title helps to point the way to its two central concerns: how to find meaning as creatures of the earth in lives that are short and frail and destined to be forgotten, and how, as stewards of the earth, to address the need to protect our home from ourselves, from the menace to life posed by our own species. The book succeeds in braiding together a recognition of our limits and of our responsibilities in ways that are deeply moving and revealing. The Times Literary Supplement, London, states the work of Carol Dennis is one praised for its, quote, integrity, its substance, and its seemingly effortless craft, and for its embodiment of passionate inquiry. Please welcome poet Carol Dennis.
Thank you, Irene. I want to thank Catherine Hastings for inviting me to read with Philip, who's a dear friend and a wonderful poet. And I'm glad to be reading at Shir Shalom. It's odd, I've never read at a temple before, and yet my my parents were members of a Reformed congregation when I was growing up.
Please excuse me.
What's going on? Okay. And I'm going to be reading 8 poems. And in honor of the setting, I'm going to read 8 poems that all have biblical references. Poems written over the last 25 years. The oldest, maybe 26 years ago, and the newest in time, just a few months ago. Okay, so the first poem is called The Promised Land. The land of Israel my mother loved gets by without the luxury of existence and still wins followers, though it can't be found on the map west of Jordan or south of Lebanon, though what can be found bears the same name, making for confusion. Not the land I fought her about for years, but the one untarnished by the smoke of history, where no one informs the people of Hebron or Jericho they're squatting on property that isn't theirs, where every settler can remember wandering. The dinners I spoiled with shouting could have been saved, both of us lingering quietly in our chairs, if I'd guessed the truth that now is obvious, that she wasn't lavishing all her love on the country that doesn't deserve so rich a gift, but on the one that does, the one not there, that she hoped good news would reach its borders and cross into the land of the righteous and merciful that the prophets spoke of in their hopeful moods, that was loved by the red-eyed rabbis of Galicia, who studied every word of the book and prayed to get one thread of the meaning right. The promised land, where the great and small hurry to school and the wise awaiting. The second poem is about Moses, and it's an attempt to write about someone who's unapproachable to my imagination by creating a double who's more congenial. My Moses, time to praise the other Moses the one who concludes that the bush isn't really burning, as he first supposed, just backlit in red by the setting sun, magnified by the need of a runaway to be pardoned, to pull his shoes off and receive a vision. The Moses who, when he lifts his staff, can't part the waters, who has to wade in at low tide and hope for the best. Nobody drowns, nobody's following. The 12 tribes, sluggish after a hard day in the quarries, didn't find his lecture on the virtues inspiring, and Pharaoh was willing to see him go. Good riddance, what with his praise of creation that gouged the work months with holidays. Now he's wringing his clothes out on the other side, relieved it hasn't taken him any longer to realize that he isn't much of a prophet, that he hasn't the gift. Free now of the journey to the promised land and the wars with the natives, he can settle down at once, whenever he pleases, and be happy, even here, in the country that disappointed Columbus. There wasn't the hoped for shortcut to spices. Happy even on this block of mine, my neighbor, the civics teacher at the high school, who leaves the gate to his yard unlocked so the neighborhood children can pick the berries before the frost comes and leaf smoke rises from small mute fires he's lit himself. So one of the gifts of the Hebrew Bible is the 7-day week, 6 days of work and one of rest. And I'm trying to now sort of, in this poem, to present the week as capacious, more capacious than usual, so that it has room for both Hebraic and pagan materials. They're kind of woven together here. 7 days. No problem making sense of the week once I convince myself that each day is meant to follow the one before or not to follow, whichever it chooses. One day for me to be the rabbi upstairs, mapping the 12 degrees of righteousness. One day to put the first degree into practice, figuring how to allow the gleaners to gather sheaves in my field after the harvest, when I have no field, just a yard in town. And then a sunny day for making my yard a kingdom of flowers to delight the eye. And a rainy day for sketching the yellow flower adorning the hair of the goddess Luna as she rows her boat through a black sky. And then a day to be sad. This image of fulfillment would be just as strange to the rabbi as his love of commandments would be to her, however many letters I carried between them. And a day to be happy I can talk to one and then to the other and agree with both, undaunted by contradiction and inconsistency. And then one day of rest from wondering if I'm to bless them as my own creation, or if they're to bless me as a restless child. This poem too has a kind of dialogue between Darwin and the material in the Bible. And I want the Darwin to be a true avenue rather than ironic foil, for that they both somehow live together in the present. It's called Rare Mood. It's more than a little daunting to conclude we're not, after all, the handiwork of a god, just the late descendant of pond scum. Still, we can take some pride in having written all the Bibles ourselves, each with a prophet or two who's more than a little vexed with our neglecting again the welfare of those outside the walls of our family compound, with our failure to clothe the naked and feed the hungry. We can take some pride in allowing a rare mood of concern for others to outweigh on a page of scripture a host of moods more self-absorbed. It's heartening to read how a father, home after a day when he's failed to sell one plowshare or pruning hook to the farmers who shop in Jericho, tries not to reprove his daughter for setting her chores aside to draw water for strangers, servants as well as masters, and for all their camels, though at first he's tempted to shout, "How long do you think our well will support us?" if you forget that among the virtues, thrift should be listed first. And if he shouts it that very night, a voice in his dream reminds him his daughter is a blessing, not a burden. What can he do, he wonders, to make sure that the husband he helps her choose, however pious, however many his virtues, understands he's a lucky man? Two poems now that use Eden, the story of Eden, to help shape their questioning. They're both about the problem of evil in the world, and the first one is about evil the human beings create. Why do the ways of the wicked prosper, as the Bible asks? So this is sort of one attempt to answer that unanswerable problem. It's called Loss. Just because your cousins perjured themselves on the stand to steal the house you inherited and have settled in and are filling the rooms with furniture your aunt would have hated, doesn't mean they're getting away with it. Just because their lights will now burn late in the house you love, and the sound of their dancing will be heard in the street, their drums and trumpets at birthday parties, graduations, and weddings, doesn't mean they're not paying the penalty, living lesser lives than they might have lived, possessing lesser amounts of comeliness. And if they're not aware of the loss, couldn't that show how shrunken their spirits are? How you wouldn't want to be them as they fall asleep at the end of a day they regard as perfect. Of course, it's hard not to wish them ill, a pain that even their thicker souls can feel. That won't widen your cramped apartment. That won't give you the spacious, airy life you admire with windows opening out on the horizon. Pity them if you can't forget them. And if that's too hard for now, pity the house. Think how it's losing out on the care you'd have bestowed on it, on the loyalty you'd have shown to its style and character, not to your fancy, a distinction too fine for the new owners to handle. Be like those angels said to enjoy the earth as a summer retreat before man entered the picture, staggering under his sack of boundary stones. They didn't mutter curses as they fastened their wings and rose in widening farewell circles. They grieved for the garden, growing smaller below them, soon to exist only as a story that every day grows harder to believe. And then the problem of luck. Why are some people luckier than others when they don't deserve? This is just a stating of the problem and not a solving. New Year's Eve. However busy you are, you should still reserve one evening a year for thinking about your double The man who took the curve on Conway Road too fast, given the icy patches that night, but no faster than you did. The man whose car, when it slid through the shoulder, happened to strike a girl walking home from a neighbor's party to her parents' farm, while your car struck nothing more notable than a snowbank. One evening for recalling how soon you transform your accident into a comic tale told first at a body shop, for comparing that hour of pleasure with his hour of pain at the house of the stricken parents, and his many long afternoons at the Lutheran graveyard. It's only human of you to assume your luck has something to do with your character. Just don't be surprised if he considers a misfortune he suffered somehow deserved, a portion of grief justly imposed. Lucky you, whose personal faith is widened to include an angel assigned to protect you from the usual outcome of heedless moments. But this evening, consider the angel he lives with, the stern enforcer who drives the sinners out of the garden with a flaming sword and locks the gates. So I'm going to conclude with two poems by two favorite books in the Bible, Jonah and Ruth. Jonah, the prophet, who shows that you have to be courageous if you're going to be a prophet because you bring bad news to people. And famously, he is told by God that he has to go to Nineveh, that great city, and tell it it's going to be destroyed in 40 days. And he's afraid and he runs away. And God goes and collects him and gives him the assignment again, which he then fulfills. And the poem is addressed to someone in the present who wants to be a prophet and who's going to face more problems even than Jonah faced. It's called Prophet. You'll never be much of a prophet if, when the call comes to preach to Nineveh, you flee on the ship for Tarshish that Jonah fled on, afraid like him of the people's outrage. Were they to hear the edict that in 40 days their city in all its glory will be overthrown? The sea storm that harried Jonah won't harry you. No big fish will be waiting to swallow you whole and keep you down in the dark till your mood shifts from fear to thankfulness and you want to serve. No, you'll land safe at Tarshish and learn a language and get a job in a counting house by the harbor and marry and raise a family you can be proud of in a neighborhood not too rowdy for comfort. If you're going to be a prophet, you must listen the first time. Setting off at sunrise, you can't be disheartened if you arrive in Nineveh long past midnight on foot, your donkey having run off with your baggage. You'll have to settle for a room in the cheapest hotel and toss on all night on a lice-ridden mattress that Jonah is spared. In the space of 3 sentences, he jumps from his donkey, speaks out, and is heeded, while you, preaching next day in the rain on a noisy corner, are likely to be ignored, outshouted by old clothes dealers and fishwives, mocked by schoolboys for your accent. And then it's a week in jail for disturbing the peace. There you'll have time as you sit in a dungeon darker than a whale's belly to ask if the trip is a big mistake, the heavenly voice mere mood, the mission a fancy. Jonah's biggest complaint is that God, when the people repent and ask forgiveness, is glad to forgive them and cancel the doomsday specified in the prophecy, leaving his prophet to look like a fool. So God takes time to explain how it's wrong to want a city like this one to burn, how a prophet's supposed to redeem the future, not predict it. But you'll be left with the question, when your city's been spared, when nobody's different, nobody in the soup kitchen you open, though one or two of the hungriest may be grateful enough for the soup to listen when you talk about turning their lives around. It'll be hard to believe these are the saving remnant, kin to the 10 just men who would have sufficed to save Gomorrah if Abraham could have found them. You'll have to tell them frankly, you can't explain why Nineveh is still standing, though you hope to learn at the feet of a prophet who, for all you know, may be turning his donkey toward Nineveh even now. Jonah is a wonderfully ecumenical book. I mean, Nineveh is full of everybody. It's Jews, Gentiles, all races, all colors, all religions, and God wants to save the city, the whole city. And that becomes Jonah's task. And the last book I want to read a poem from, the last poem is about Ruth, which obviously is an ecumenical book because Ruth is a Moabite, not a Hebrew woman. And she's brought in, not only is she brought into the tribe, but she's the great grandmother of King David in this little genealogy that the writer sticks in with inspiration, just as thumb nose at all the tribal purists. Anyway, Ruth. Central to the story of my favorite heroine in the Hebrew Bible is her not being born a Hebrew. Here's a young Moabite woman who sets aside the voice of prudence when her husband dies. Instead of remaining with her own people in the land of Moab, she chooses to go with her mother-in-law, Naomi, who decides to return to the land she came from, the land of Judah. Be sensible, urges Naomi. Stay here and may God be with you. Here where you're much more likely to find another husband. But Ruth won't listen. Wherever you're going, I'm going too. No voice from the sky instructs her to do something so strange. None like the voice that orders Abraham to leave Ur, home of his fathers, for a shadowy future. Love for Naomi impels her, not obedience. Love which has little to do with service, with sacrifice for another's sake. It's a matter of her conviction that her life will blossom best in the sunshine of Naomi's soul. As for my hero, I choose a scribe I imagine fashioning a heroine who knows next to nothing of Hebrew history or of the Hebrew God when she assures Naomi, your people shall be my people, your God, my God, which is to say, whatever God you worship must be a good one, and any friend of yours is a friend of mine. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Professor Carl Dennis. I must confess, I didn't even know you were Jewish. I've heard you read before, but I really feel strongly that you selected this material to share with us in this space. It felt very important to me, and I'm sorry Rabbi Alex is not here tonight, but he will see the recording and I will tell him about what you read tonight. And I thank you for the open windows and for the garden. And of course, Ruth, whose story is, in a sense, my story also. So now, before we go to the Q&A, we usually have one. Our poet Philip Schultz has asked if you would come up, please, and read a poem or two and show your face and say hello, because he would like to see you. Would you mind? Please.
Change the screen.
Well, it came about that I read a poem in the New Yorker, and I thought it was such a beautiful poem, and it must have been in the, I think it was the early 80s. And I wrote the New Yorker and I said, I'd like to write a letter to this author, Philip Schultz. Could you forward this letter on? I guess enclosed it. And he wrote me back. And it turned out he's originally from Rochester, but lived in New York. And we wrote once or twice. And anyway, I followed his poetry and said, I can get you a reading in Buffalo, because that was the Allentown Community Center. And you know, I knew he was a good poet, and wouldn't it be wonderful to have him come to Buffalo? And I think he had reasons to go to Rochester. At that point, he still had relatives, family there. So he came. And actually I read also with him, which was a lucky break for me, but we became friends, and he's come many times since, because he and Carl became good friends, and he made friends here in Buffalo. And I've seen Phil in New York also. So that's, and we keep in touch. I know the names of his sons, things like that. It's nice to, you know. So I'm just going to read one poem. It's new-ish. I mean, within a year, so that's new. I'm writing quite a lot still. Sometimes you run out of things to write about, but I don't seem to have yet. This is called The Green Blanket. Well bundled in bed, post-operative, right leg swathed in ample bandages, elevated on pillows, the giant ice machine churns and surges out something like release from the nonstop jolts of pain stabbing my shin. Through a fog, I recognize the youngest of my 3 daughters looming by me. I brought you your keys, she seems to be saying. My keys? I'm confused. Am I supposed to be going somewhere? What have I forgotten now? My keys, I mumble? No, Mom, your cane. I thought perhaps you'd like to try out the brand new cane. What a relief. No need to be anywhere but in my bed, tucked in my green wool blanket, the one with my high school name tag sewn on it by my attentive mother 65 years ago when I was setting off for college. So much has changed and nothing much has changed. I'm still here, my green blanket still keeping me warm, as my ever-present mother bends over me, healing me in the familiar face of my youngest daughter. Thank you. And I'm so glad to be telling.
Thank you so much, Ansi Baird, and our 2 fabulous readers called Dennis and Philip Schultz. And we usually open up for a short while if you have any questions to the featured readers that you would like to ask. Please come up here if you feel like you want to be heard.
Question for Carl Dennis. Are the poems you read here scattered through your books? Okay, I'm not familiar with those, and now I'll be sure to look for them. Thank you so much. It was also such a moving reading.
I want to ask Carl, how far back you're in. Oh, I wanted to ask Carl, now I can hear it, how far back your apparent interest in, biblical stuff goes, when it began.
Probably, if you want to be heard, it's probably. Please, if you don't mind.
Well, that's hard to say, but I heard a lot of stories when I went to Sunday school at this temple. Biblical stories, which were all new to me. So I had to eventually read them in the Bible, but I got them first orally through the rabbis who were, a couple of rabbis who were good storytellers. And then, it has to do with the fact that there's a period of time in which you feel that you need myth, you need ancient stories in your poems to give them a certain kind of width or depth, when that isn't always true. But anyway, so I mean, I've written a lot about Greek gods and goddesses when I needed them. And so it seemed the other great source for myth in the West is the Bible. And so it seemed inevitable to use both of them. And the perspectives are so different that's also a shorthand way of writing about tensions and divisions in the culture.
Well, I'd like to ask a question of Phil, because here he is somewhere, and do you still have connections with Rochester, Phil? And also, do you still walk on the beach with a dog?
Yes. Hi, Nancy. I really don't have any. I used to be brought up there to read at U of R or other places, but I guess the pandemic has really slowed things down. So it's been a while. I no longer have family living in Rochester, and that I know of. So I haven't had any real connection in a while. Yes, every morning I and a collection of dog owners walk the ocean and get together, and it's fun and it's good exercise. And it's something I very much look forward to.
Yeah, more questions, please. Yeah, please. I just wanted to say to Philip Schultz, you now have family here in Buffalo, so please join us anytime.
Well, thank you.
I just noticed in this book that I've enjoyed for a little while now, that a poem that I marked as one of my favorites is called In Traffic, and it's by Carl Dennis, but it's for Philip Schultz, and it's about missing a party. And I wondered, I don't know if Carl would like to talk about how that came about. Did you miss a party, or if Mr. Philip Schultz remembers that?
Okay, I just want to thank you. I just want to say that it's not a party that Phil gave that I missed. It's just a poem that Phil, we share poetry with each other, and Phil has given me wonderful help. And so this is one poem he really liked when he saw the manuscript the first time. So I needed him to like something in the manuscript very strongly. And he liked that poem. So why not dedicate it to him?
Hi, Philip, I have a question for you. When I realized that you were going to be reading, I went to my diary and I said, Philip Schultz, I think I met him at one point. And that was a long time ago. In my diary, I found that I drove you to Rochester. At that time, this was before, I think, the reading that answered you first, possibly. Anyway, it was about 50 years ago. And my closest friend at that time that I associated you with was John Logan. And what I really wanted to ask you is whether you still think of John Logan and what you would say in his memory at this point.
Well, could you tell me your name? Because you look very familiar. What's your name?
My name is Max Wickert.
Okay, yes. I remember you were kind enough to drive me to Rochester. I remember that. And well, thank you. And I wonder if I live in the tip of Long Island, could you come and get me and take me to Rochester, Buffalo now? I'm joking. I haven't thought of, every now and then I go over all my poetry books and take a look at different sections, and I see some of John's books, and I remember the wonderful book Zigzag Walk and his wonderful poems, and I've taught them. It's been a while, but I've taught his poetry. I'm trying to remember where I really knew John. I can't quite remember. Not in Buffalo, somewhere else. But thank you for asking. It's quite a memory.
He knew you, I know, long before you became famous, I think. He thought of you as a very, very promising young poet. That's why, that's why I bring this up. I had assumed that you were close friends. Maybe we're not. Maybe that wasn't how you knew each other.
Well, we knew each other, but
how did you meet?
I'm trying to remember. We weren't really close friends. I'm wondering if he was at Iowa when I was there. Or no, wait a minute. Did he have? Oh, wait a minute. He taught at San Francisco State College.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yes, when I went there, I got my undergraduate degree. So maybe we met there in a class. Maybe I took a class. It's so long ago, I don't remember. But there was, yes, I think it was from San Francisco.
Does the name Roger Applin mean anything to you?
Roger who?
Applin?
No.
Okay. Well, that was no San Francisco State acquaintance of his that he that was. Well, I think I first saw a poem of yours in Choice. Did you publish in Choice?
Yes. And who was the editor of Choice again? God.
John was the editor. He was the editor of the poetry, and Siskin was the editor of the photography. Aaron Siskin.
But there was a general editor of Choice that I knew, and I'm who taught at Binghamton, and I'm trying to remember. I don't remember.
That was Binghamton poet. I'm having a senior moment, but he was the editor of Choice for a year that John went abroad when was on leave. Anyway.
Yes.
Did we have any other questions?
This is not a question, but one comment that I want to make to Philip Schultz is I had brought your poem Pumpernickel to a poetry circle, a group that we have. And everyone enjoyed the poem so much, and everyone was so intrigued that the next time we met, I made a loaf of pumpernickel.
See, we all need good poets and good bakers and good. Well, so much. I just wanted to mention briefly that next month, which is also happens to be on the 16th of March, we will meet here again or on Zoom. And we are welcoming Buffalo State Professor Kim Shin-Kei and also Alicia Ostriker or Striker. You correct me. Ostriker? Ostriker, yeah. I just took a class with her, 4 hours. It was wonderful. So yes, by all means, join us next month. And to whet your appetite, I thought I would read a poem by Alicia Ostriker. She's known as probably the most famous female Jewish feminist mother, you name it, poet in America and maybe in the world. And here's her wonderful poem. I loved it, so I picked it. The Blessing of the Old Woman, the Tulip, and the Dog. Philip Schultz, I too like to walk my dog. Here it is by Alicia Ostriker. To be blessed, said the old woman, is to live and work so hard God's love washes right through you like milk through a cow. To be blessed, said the dark red tulip, is to knock their eyes out with a slug of lust implied by your upended skirt. To be blessed, said the dog, is to have a pinch of God inside you and all the other dogs can smell it. Thank you all. I hope to see you next month. Thank you for coming. Thank you to all my friends who are over there on the screen. I saw your names. I saw you. Thank you.
Thank you and good night. Good to see you, Carol. Nancy. Catherine.
That one on your right. Just go ahead down. That one.
I'll say hello and we're positive. You know the story.
Yes.
We're the same. Age.
Oh, we're third cousin.
Fanny brother.
Oh, wow.
So I just wanted to put a face to them.
Great. Well, thank you for coming. Yeah. See you. She's going to decide now because. Yeah.
I know you think that that's. You know, okay.
Put the candle out.